Our book group read the nonfiction novels The House of My Mother by Shari Franke and I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. Sarah and I read The House of My Mother, while Avery read I'm Glad My Mom Died.
In Shari Franke's book, Shari's mother, Ruby Franke, practices extreme Mormon values, one of which being the documentation of their family's daily lives and how their faith influences their audience. For years and years, Shari, along with her 5 siblings, were under the constant burden of having a vlog camera shoved in their faces and plastered on the internet for the sake of their family's financial income. With Shari and her siblings regularly developing through life, not always being comfortable with the camera recording every move they make was a common occurrence in their household.
In Jennette McCurdy's book, I'm Glad My Mom Died, Jennette speaks to the world as she describes the hidden tragedies of her childhood stardom. In her memoir, she details the difficulties of growing up with an emotionally abusive mom who ultimately forced her into her child acting career. Her relationship with her mom becomes increasingly complicated and disturbing as Jennette ages, which causes many of the issues she faces when she's an adult. She grows up worshiping her mom and only wants to make her happy, and her mother takes advantage of this and takes over her career, her life, and her childhood. When her mother dies, Jennette's entire life changes, and she's left coping with feelings of loss, love, and confusion.
Sarah and I decided to relate the textbook entry, Mother Tongue, by Amy Tan to our book, The House of My Mother, by Shari Franke. The morals and purposes between these two books have very little in common, but they both share the idea of a mother's backstory affecting their way of life. Amy Tan's relationship with her mother was mainly positive but discouraging, as she had to feel her mother's frustration with the English language, and felt the frustration as if it were her own. This relates to Shari's book because Shari had to constantly live by her mother's rules and felt the weight of frustration and extreme beliefs Ruby pushed onto the family. This form of mental abuse was a popular technique of discipline and a way to train the kids to become more comfortable around the camera and vlogging. After looking at The House of My Mother, we saw that the author Shari Franke used a lot of diction and uses a pessimistic tone while referencing her past. Now you will hear Sarah and I's informal conversation regarding The House of My Mother. Within the Mormon religion, it's highly looked upon to keep a record of your daily life, whether it's keeping a journal, making videos, going out and talking to a lot of people about your faith and how it's influenced you. And so Ruby Franke was really religious, and she grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, and she knew from a young age that she wanted to be a mother and raise her kids within the faith.
And I think that was one of the biggest reasons why she wanted to start her 8 Passengers YouTube channel and start family vlogging, was because she wanted to document all those moments, but at the same time represent the church and say, look, we're a good Mormon family, we're doing all this family vlogging, everyone loves us. And it even worked out eventually in her advantage, because in the docuseries there was a clip of a viewer who walked up to them on just a random street and said, and Ruby, of course, pulled out her camera and started recording, and she said, "What's your name?" He said, "My name is so-and-so," and he proceeded to mention that he was joining the Church of Latter-day Saints after watching and subscribing to the 8 Passengers family channel. And at that moment, Ruby basically had made it, because that was her intention, she wanted to be known as the mother of YouTube, essentially, and spread her faith throughout her viewers.
And we see later in the book that Ruby's extreme religious beliefs kind of become askew, and after her 2 oldest children end up moving out and getting kicked out of the home, She has the youngest four, just her, and she's running a tight ship. And when the police come to her house, they find her children locked up in chains, severely abused. They can't find the two oldest daughters. And while they're scanning the house for evidence, they find a notebook because she has to keep a journal because that's what she does with her faith, and that's like what she likes doing. And they found that she was calling her children's like demons, evil, like she needed to get like the devil out of them, saying that they were like taken over by Satan and stuff, and said that she would do anything, like go to any extremes. Like she would even go to like killing or like getting rid of her children in order for them to go to the celestial kingdom and like be with God.
Okay, so another connection between our books is that Jennette is also a Mormon, but it's not as big of a factor in her book as it is in your guys' book. But it does sort of play a part in the beginning because when she was growing up, like her house was so stressful because of her mom that when they would go to church, it was like her refuge and she would really look forward to it. So not so much of an abusive issue for Jennette as it was for you guys, but she was also Mormon and it did play a part in her life. And she sort of looked at it in the opposite way of like her religion was her way of getting away from her chaotic childhood that her mom caused. And later in the book, she gets like, she calls it in the book her Holy Ghost, like the little one, like it's like this voice in her head that basically is just ends up being OCD, but like she thinks it's like this voice of God like speaking to her, telling her to do these things for her mother, but in reality it's just like her doing like these little like tasks to like help please her mother. So that's another similarity, but they're definitely different. So, as mentioned before, Jennette's mother abused her basically just mentally for her entire childhood. And she also caused a lot of problems that carried on into her adulthood. And, like, for example, when Jennette's, like, still pretty young, like 14 maybe, her mom starts her on a calorie diet because she wants Jennette to stay small for acting so that she can get more parts. So like Jennette writes, we're keeping a 1,000 calorie diet, but I have the smart idea that if I only eat half my food, I'll only be receiving half the calories, which means that I will be shrinking twice as fast. I proudly show my half-eaten portions to Mom after every meal. She beams. Each Sunday, she weighs me and measures me with a measuring tape. After a few weeks of our routine, she provides me with a stack of diet books that I finish quickly. So this kind of shows that, like, in your guys' book, I feel like the abuse is a lot more physical in the end. I mean, there's, like, more mental abuse too, but, like, I think Jennette's mom, like, this is sort of physical and mental, but this really affected her, like, mental health and caused her eating disorder that she developed later on in life.
In Shari's book, she does mention that the abuse that came from her mother did start as physical as much as they'd be playing the piano and her hands would be slammed against the keys by her mother, or they would get a slap to the cheek if they refused to do a video, or just small little like flicks and hits and random things like that. But she did mention that as Shari got older and as she started becoming a young adult, the abuse eventually became very mental, and that is also when Jody Hildebrandt, their quote-unquote therapist, came into the family, and she was brought in to essentially help Shari with her mental health, but she all of her tactics and all of her uses were all brainwashing Shari into thinking that she's demonized and that Shari was the problem all the time, and really a therapist that's telling you that and who's convincing you that you are the problem and that the whole world is out to get you, that brought Shari absolutely nowhere. And seeing the relationship between Jody and her mother being extremely close, it felt almost as if Shari was completely fighting her issues alone, and she had no other choice but to feed into this delusion that Jody and her mother were feeding into her and her family.
So growing up, Shari Franke had a lot of siblings, and her closest sibling was the second oldest, which was Chad. Chad was not a bad kid, but he got into a lot of trouble. And so one morning, he got up and he woke his little brother up and said, like, oh, we're going to Disney World. Like, we're going, like, get ready, get packed. Like, let's go. In reality, he was just pranking him, and he just wanted to see, like, how his little brother would react. But since Ruby Franke, their mother, has such strong beliefs, and she doesn't really like when Chad messes around or gets into trouble, she punished Chad by making him sleep on a beanbag for 7 months straight. Shari Franke is now an advocate for House Bill 322 that protects children from social media and requires parents of child performers, including family vlogging, to deposit 15% of their child's income into a trust. If parents insist on family vlogging, children under 18 have to have a trust fund and get earnings from the videos.
So in Jennette's book, a rhetorical choice that she used, similar to your guys' book, was she used diction, and a lot of her specific writing choices she made in hopes to make the book sound like she was sort of a child. Like at the beginning of the book, in her childhood chapters, she writes it in a way that like a person of her age at that time would write it, so that the reader kind of understands gets more of a feel for how she's feeling at that time. So she'll write I've been slacking and I need to stop. I need to get back to this. She uses short sentences, and just the way that she writes the book, it's not overly complicated. It's more simplified, similar to how a child would write her experience.
This next segment we had to speed up to save on time.
Starting with events that happened in Shari's book, one of the themes in the book was how Shari eventually picked up on her mother's misuse of family vlogging, and she quickly realized that family vlogging wasn't a positive thing that her mother was trying to do for the family. It was a way of exploiting these kids in order to get money, and it constantly talked about in the book, as well as they came out with a docuseries, how they eventually Ruby never wanted money from family vlogging. She just wanted to be known as the greatest mother and a advocate for mothers all around.
Yeah, and Shari Franke, the author of our book, she didn't really realize how bad her mother was until she went off to college and got to step away and then look back.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite of Jennette in her book, because she didn't really realize that her mother was mentally abusing her and was not a super positive influence until after she died. But she would do her mom would do similar things because she wanted Jennette to be the star, because she wanted to be a star when she was a kid, but she never got the opportunity. So she kind of forced Jennette into all of the acting that she did, and would sort of make her rehearse lines for so many hours and do rituals before the auditions and stuff to get her prepared, and she was super hard on her. So she would also kind of just live through Jennette, and it became kind of a negative influence on Jennette's life.
In Shari's book, she mentions how eventually, not long after they started family vlogging, she picked up on Ruby's ways of the camera, I guess, and she eventually started using vlogging as a way to get what she wanted from her mom, essentially. So she would know that when the camera's rolling, Ruby puts on basically a different act in front of the camera. She'd never, yell at her kids like she would off camera. She would never leave them alone and force them to do child labor outside. So when the camera was rolling, she would specifically ask her mom for things that she knew the answer would normally be no for, because her mom, I just said that, get that quick notes. And she, in a specific line in the text, was when Shari said that she wanted to go out and get ice cream with her friends, and her mom said, okay, sure, but you have to go film it. If you film it, I'll give you money to pay for the ice cream. So it was basically a reward for providing for the family through vlogging. It would be a job almost, even if it wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah, so Shari, she had 5 other siblings, and on camera, whenever they'd film and vlog, people in their comments would always say that Shari was a narc, or she was telling on her siblings, or that she would always go to her mom for all these like little things. But really, Shari was just doing it for attention, because the only way that she was receiving attention and affection was on camera.
Yeah, I would say again that Jennette's experience is a little bit different, just in the sense that like you guys are saying how like Shari figured out how her mom like used the camera and she would use it to her advantage, but Jennette was sort of the opposite, because since she didn't realize her mother's abuse until after she passed away, she was kind of like she just wanted to make her mom happy, so she would do everything. It's like stated multiple times in the book how she was like, when mom's happy, I'm happy, even though it wasn't true, because like her mom was happy she was acting, but she wasn't happy she was acting. But yeah, and she didn't really advocate for herself. She more just like did what she could to make her mom pleased with her, and so that's like a little bit different than your guys' book, but still like the concepts are pretty similar about how like parents can sometimes unintentionally or intentionally like take advantage of their kids, and they might or might not know.
Okay, I would say the main like purpose and message of my book is sort of that, like, similar to your guys, sort of bring attention to like kids in acting and like how there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that people don't know about. And I think Jennette's this was more of a personal purpose for her of writing this book, was sort of to close the chapter on this experience for her that was very important to her life and bring awareness to like the challenges that often come with child stardom that a lot of the public doesn't know. And the impact that this book has is like super important on a lot of people, and it helps a lot of people feel seen in the sense that like some people's parents might make them feel similar to how her mother did, and like they might not realize that until they read the book. And like there's a lot of important things that she discusses in this book, and it's not only her mother. Like she talks about like when she was on Nickelodeon for iCarly, there's a lot of abuse from the directors and like the creators of the show that went on behind the scenes that no one talked about before. And just like after her mom dies and she quits acting, like sort of reconciling with like all of the experience that she's had and like everything that she's been through, and just trying to get over that and help people overcome their difficulties too.
I think these books also show how easy it is to manipulate someone. Like in Sarah and I's book, The House of My Mother, we see how easily like Ruby, the mother, is manipulated by her Mormon beliefs, and we see how she manipulates her children and how she manipulates her audience, and how like the family's therapist manipulated all of them. And so it's just so easy to trick people into believing a false narrative without any proof or evidence to back it up.
The impact that these books have on the audiences advocate for child influencers as well as healthy family relationships outside of the media, and understanding for the readers of these books that the public is what is fueling the push of both parents' extreme beliefs and behaviors towards their children, and the reason that these issues with child labor are even starting. It's fueled from the media and how people perceive these families and what they want their children to become of.